Welcome to the Over the Hump podcast. Your gateway to the world of the iconic Brahman breed of cattle. At BRC Ranch, our passion for Brahman cattle runs deep. Join us as we delve into the heart of this extraordinary breed, unveiling its rich history, exploring industry trends, and sharing captivating stories that define the American Brahman. BRC Ranch stands as the pinnacle of Brahman excellence in America, boasting a decade-long legacy of champions and housing the finest Brahman bulls worldwide. It's not just about cattle, it's about a legacy that reverberates across ranches and hearts. Brought to you by BRC Ranch, where the Brahman legacy thrives and stories are woven into the very fabric of ranching. This is Over the Hump. And now your hosts, Brendan Cottrell, Rachel Cottrell, and Keaton Dodd.
Welcome to this week's episode of Over the Hump podcast. Today, we are discussing polarizing topics in cattle breeding. And just kind of for an outline, some of these topics would be breeding for outliers, going back and using old genetics in present day, line breeding, the impact of one breeding decision on your herd, and then wrapping up with using data versus visual ID when you're making breeding decisions. So this is a great podcast. It's about an hour long, and we hope you enjoy it. Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of Over the Hump podcast. Today I'm your host, Rachel Cottrell, and I will be moderating a fun topic of polarizing topics in animal breeding, and our two experts today are Keaton Dodd and Brandon Cottrell. So welcome, guys.
Well, glad to be here.
So I guess since we have had our last podcast, we recorded our last one of all three of us before the All-American, right? So we haven't had you didn't go to the All-American,
right.
Keaton.
No, I got to avoid that.
So we haven't had a chance to really catch up on the All-American. I don't know, Brandon, you want to catch us up on show results of the All-American, or do you even remember?
I don't. I've already moved on to the next thing. I know we had a fun time at the All-American and had a successful show and had a great time, so good with me.
Well, it's kind of, so I will give the official recap.
Go for
then
it.
I would say Sweetie had a fabulous show,
Oh,
just like she did at
absolutely.
Houston, with definitely the highlight being Gus, BRC Gussied Up, being the champion heifer, shown by Wyatt Landry, which was exciting. Second in that class and reserve senior champion behind her was Molly with Smoke Show, so full sisters there.
Mhm.
And then Minnie was a division champion
Division 2, maybe?
in like Division 2 or 3, who's also a full sister to those three heifers. So that's pretty cool. 3 full sibs that all got a piece of the division. One of the fun highlights was BRC Shush, who is Leighton Joe Jefferson's.
I forgot about
I
Shush.
really like that heifer.
She has been doing amazing. She won her class at the All-American and TJBA. And for those that don't know the story on her, BRC Shush is bred and owned by Annie Cottrell, because shush is one of Annie's favorite statements to tell us when we interrupt her in the room. And then Annie and Leighton have become really good buddies at the stock show. So last fall at the Night of Champions, Leighton specifically wanted an Annie branded heifer, and she bought Shush. I think it was in the $7,000 range.
She's an affordable heifer
Yeah.
for sure, and she sold another full sister to that heifer too. But
Yeah,
she's exceeded expectations, and they've done such a good job with her. But she's turned out to be a really nice heifer.
yeah.
Really nice. And it doesn't hurt that Leighton Joe is an exceptional showman and can really get her stuck.
Yeah. So I would also like to point out on the record that these winners are 0% my breeding and 100% your guys' brain trust.
Newsflash, you guys heard it here first.
So breeding from Rachel Cottrell's core program did not win anything at the All-American. It was all breeding from Brandon and Keaton's genetic expertise, which is why we're having this podcast
We're a team.
today.
We're a
That's why
team.
we're having this podcast. So
I do think that's pretty impressive, though. That one single mating contributed probably a third of the grand drive in the female show. We're all full sisters.
And not to
Cool.
mention Johnny is that same cross, which he, not a junior show bull, but
Yeah, and we've got 2 or 3 that were fixing to wean and send right to the barn too. So we've got some more coming up out of that same mating.
So at the show, we had a funny conversation that I want you to share, Brandon, is because Molly, she loves showmanship. She got second in her class in reserve division. And we made the comment after the show that there was a lot of bulls showing in the showmanship. So, at the All-American, if you show a bull, they bring in all the bulls first so they don't, interfere with the rest of the class. And then they bring in everybody else in age order. So we just made a comment that, man, there was a lot of kids showing bulls in showmanship. And Brandon, I don't know if you would like to jump in here, but...
Yeah, but I think y'all, with the way you said it, you were kind of throwing some shade at it. You kind of condescending. And I was like, well, wait a second. That's what I showed.
He confessed that he was the kid that showed a bull. I didn't mean it condescending, but I will say it is harder to show a bull in showmanship. And it has the possibility to create train wrecks in the ring for others if the bull decides to start acting up or whatever,
Yeah, but heifers act up plenty too.
But you shared with us that you were the kid that always showed a bull because that's all you had.
Yeah, when you think about what's the most economical animal to buy, it's a red Brahman bull. So showing up, especially in Mississippi.
1998 in Poplarville, Mississippi.
That's right. So a red Brahman bull, you go buy that sucker and doesn't break the bank, and then you can just have fun with your project.
So how did that work out for you?
Never really too good.
Did you ever win the showmanship with your bull?
No, never.
Oh, dang, I was going to be a shocker. So when you criticize Connor when he's showing, we just have to remind Brandon that he, in fact, did not win with his bull.
No, never. But no, at the time, that's what I had. I wanted to show. I wanted to participate, and so that's what we did.
Most cost-effective project that you could purchase.
That's right. Oh, I do remember All-American at Glen Rose, Texas in showmanship. I placed dead last with my red Brahman bull.
Oh. And in showmanship?
Yes, in showmanship.
Is that where you hit the guy with the show stick?
No, that was a few years before. This one was, the bull wasn't acting very good. But the other one, I did not clean the bull's ears before I walked into showmanship. And so as Bruce Straub, former manager of Double J Ranch in Scott, Louisiana, was judging showmanship, he was kind of walking down the line, and he pulled me quick. And he just looked at those ears, and didn't help that the bull wasn't acting the best anyhow. But that was how he made his first cut. It was check and see who didn't clean their ears. Bam, I fell right into it.
That explains why you're such a fanatic about that now.
I don't miss. I do not miss a show cleaning ears now. Thank you, Bruce Straub.
We should start that. Anytime I judge showmanship, that should be our gate cut.
Oh,
whether your ears are clean or not.
Each one. Grab them by the ear, look under.
Now, I'm not even going to say that part because that's my secret.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You have an ear cleaning secret?
Well, yeah, I do.
Okay. So I have to share. I don't even know, Keaton. Well, yes, I think you do know about this, but earlier in the week, we had got in, and it was so hot that day. I don't know if y'all remember. Well, you weren't there, but it was miserably hot, and people hadn't got their portacles and all that set up. And Smoke Show was not having it, and she was not wanting to eat, not wanting to drink, and of course, if y'all know me, I was freaking out. I was freaking out and texting all of my close confidants, asking what to do, and then how long did she go without drinking anything?
2.5 days.
2.5 days. And so I'm thinking, I think she just got too hot maybe. But I was thinking she's so heavy bred. She's, I'm thinking this animal could die here at the show. And then what are we going to do? And it may be that she was just pissed at us for bringing her back to Bryan, Texas for another week because she is kind of a fanatic. But I do a story I want to share is that I was freaking out. Brandon was neutrally freaking out. We even had Connor bring up some water from the house to try that route. But the person who helped us kind of give us some advice and try to get her back on track was Jacob Tipp, who was tied head to head with us at the show. And this is a good story. So if you know how the show ended up, Gus was champion and Candy, the Tips heifer, was reserve, and Smoke Show was left standing, but she was the reserve senior champion. And if I had to guess, I would probably think the judge was weighing in his mind, is it between Smoke Show and Candy? I could be completely wrong, but
language,
kind of they both are big, heavy bred.
Makes it sound better. We'll go with that.
But anyway, the story I want to share is that at the end of the day, the people that were our biggest competitors are the ones that helped us. And I think we need to share more stories like that about these shows, because to me, that's how showing should be. Like, you should help your friends, make friends, and just be happy, whoever wins. And that's exactly how this week worked out. And so, feel good vibes.
Well, now you're making me feel guilty about not sharing my ear secret.
You're allowed one.
Yes. Well, on the last podcast, you would not believe the number of people that texted me and told me they have a secret sound that they share with their kids. I'm still yet to know what this secret sound is, but lots of show parents do have that. But anyway, let's jump into the topic today. Topic is polarizing topics of cattle breeding. And I don't even know. I've got 5 or 6 that I jotted down, but to me, these are the things that I guess would be concepts or philosophies of animal breeding that people tend to argue about. Is that a safe way to?
Yeah, I would think so.
So I'm just going to start tossing some out, and then you guys go with it. So the first one, I guess like a subheading for this, but I'll share the scenario. It's something that I've been seeing a lot recently on Facebook amongst Brahman breeders, and it is people posting pictures of some of their cattle and saying, oh, I've got this big, powerful female. I think she should be winning every show. She's got the biggest bone I've ever seen. She's so powerful. Powerful is such a buzzword. That's a whole nother topic too. But, she's the biggest war horse we've ever seen, yet she's not winning in shows. And maybe they have a little bit of bitterness. I don't know. Or maybe it's not bitterness, but it's maybe just questions of why their big power cow is not winning. I would call an animal like that an outlier. And so I think that's the topic of breeding outliers, breeding for outliers, working with outliers, how, so maybe I think where we start on this is I'm going to get our resident master's degree expert, Keaton, to define what is an outlier. What would you call an outlier? And maybe some examples of those, if we have them in our herd?
Outlier by definition, I guess, would be the distance from the mean. So
is that the right term even?
Outliers would be a good way of putting it. But yeah, animals that are multiple standard deviations away from the mean in whatever trait you're measuring. And so like an outlier for what you're talking about, maybe it's frame size, an outlier for frame size. And so they're frame score 11 and everything else in their age group is more the frame score 6, 6.5. And I think of it as kind of the breeding for maximums mentality, and Brandon and I will probably talk about this as we kind of discuss this trait, but I can think of a reason for almost every trait that you could think of relating to cattle breeding and tell you a position where there's too much. And so whether that's bone, I can point you to an example of bone and too much. Frame, trait like milk, right? At the simplest concept is you think more milk equals better. I can 100% show you a situation where too much milk is a negative. And so I think that's with everything. Is
muscle.
Yeah, muscle. Where it becomes a structural limitation or creates dystocia issues and things like that. And so I wish that there was more people that understood the issues that come along with a maximum mentality, I guess you'd say. Brandon, anything to tack on there?
Yeah, a lot of times it is easy to shoot for the maximum because, especially if you're maybe not quite sure of yourself in certain areas, it's easy to go with the ESTs, the biggest number or the biggest bone, the heaviest muscle. Those EST statements, it's easy to pick that out. If you're looking down a line of heifers and you can say, who's the biggest? Or who's got the biggest bone or something like that, and you may not necessarily read structure, femininity, or something like that, it's easier to pick those big ones, or those who's the smallest, who's the biggest, and focus on the maximums when we really should be focusing on the optimums. It's not necessarily about maximizing yields, but optimizing yields and how you can do it in an efficient manner. And so I feel like sometimes, especially newer breeders, can fall into looking at the EST things and picking out those maximums. But as you go and mature as a breeder and you start putting these cattle to work, especially in the pasture, and find out the cattle that can perform the best with the least amount of inputs are never any of those EST types. They're always the optimum cattle that are right down the middle that just seem to do the best. And I think I guess there could almost be a linear map or even a bell curve map of the progression of a breeder and their maturity when you start getting into it. So when you first get into it, you're looking at the maximums and the ESTs because that's what's easy. Then you go through a stage where you're just trying to pump it into them, and you feed them and feed them and feed them and get them fatter and bigger, fatter, bigger, fatter, bigger. But then over the next few years, as you're getting those cattle into production, you're running out of money on your inputs, and you're not getting enough out of them on that backside of it because the cattle are not producing like they need to. One, they're not calving like they need to. Two, they're not meeting your expectations. So your inputs are super, super high, but you're not getting the returns. And then so you have this mental, I don't know, almost mental crash where you're like, what am I going to do? And you make a hard turn to the left and you're like, I'm going to go find these cattle that can put it in there. And you do it, and then you start kind of tempering those EST things. You're bringing them back down to more optimums, and you start to see, hey, this is really working. And then over time, you just kind of hone in on those traits that work. But I think it's a normal path to follow as you get into breeding purebred cattle.
We followed that path. That whole path you're describing, we clearly went down.
Yeah, and you can see it in our program.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad to say I think we're on the leveled out deal where we're leveled out and then increasing the optimum stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just two anecdotal observations, I guess, relating to specifically outliers or breeding for extremes. And one would be that I've noticed usually in matings where you have an extreme outlier, there's more throwaways, aka more steers, more cold females.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I've noticed would be a lot of times when you get that outlier, it seems like they don't breed as consistently because their phenotype doesn't match the genetics that's stacked in there for generations. So the sister that looks extreme, she's probably going to still breed pretty similar to all of the rest of her sisters that are bred the same, even if she looks quite a bit different than the rest of them. But thinking like having an example, I guess, to kind of back up our claim, like the 242 mating, the Big Mamu, she turned out to be awesome in an extreme way. And she had two brothers that didn't make it. I mean, they got culled out of the system because they had a flaw, whether it was birth weight or whatever it may be.
Now they hit the mark, what we were aiming for on
visually
on that particular
like the streams.
Yeah. Well, let me back. So like that mating was a really close mating in relation.
Sure, what the mating is.
So it's 160 bred back to his grandmother.
341/7.
341/7. She was one of the extreme cows that we're talking about. She was the outlier. She was the big-boned, big-framed, massive animal. Hardly never won a show.
Sweetie before
she
5
did.
years.
She was reserve senior champion behind
at the Dixie National.
At Houston.
Yeah, you're right.
She was. Right. I know she was reserve senior champion.
She won something at Fort Worth too, but anyway.
That's right. And then really,
she's the mother of Lupita.
Yeah, mother of Lupita. So, okay, we'll just take it this way. So, at our stage,
my core breeding.
At our stage,
75.
I'm going to go kind of rabbit hole this real quick. At our stage of breeding at that time, so this would have been back in 2013. We had those two females, 382/7, who was moderate,
mother boom shot,
big ribbed. Just middle of the row, kind of check a lot of boxes type. And then we had 341, who was the big bone, massive, huge, cow that was.
For the record, I will say, when you saw that cow in the pasture, she was exceptional. She looked exceptional. She did.
She
You
will
admit
catch your
it.
eye.
You admit
But
it.
catching your eye ain't also always necessarily helpful.
Right.
But she would catch your eye. But I mean, I remember at our maturity stage as breeders at that time back in 2013. So that would have been, well, shoot, we're 13
years ago.
12,
I don't know,
13
12
years
years
ago,
ago?
something like that. That was the one that you and I liked.
Mhm.
And so much so that we almost left 382 at home
Mhm.
because we wanted to, like, this is where we want to
I
go.
think you showed
Yeah,
341.
I chose
when they
to
were in
show
the class.
341 over 382, and then 382 comes and wins and all that kind of stuff. And so, but going on from there, over time, 382 was the better producer. 341 was a good producer, but she was hit and miss. So what we found out, you can't breed power to power because you get a lot of throwaways.
Don't breed freak to freak.
Don't breed freak to freak. And so really between those two cows, they probably helped open my eyes and see some things. Now, there was a lot of other cows along the way, but between those two cows and seeing the differences in those two cows kind of helped figure things out over time.
Both have been influential.
That's right.
In our herd.
Oh, absolutely.
Arguably very influential, just in different ways. And I think y'all have had to be very conscientious on your breeding
That's
of
right.
the 341 line.
So back to our, before I got way off on that halfway tangent, we were talking about that when we mated that cow, over time as we learned to breed that cow. So 341, she probably had the highest birth weight EPD of the entire breed. Every calf she had would be, early on, would be over 100 pounds at birth. So if you're looking at trying to sell those bulls to commercial guys, it ain't happening. So we started cutting all those bulls. And I'm like, well, this ain't working because, and even some of her heifers would be really high.
I'm going to jump in. I think you're in the initial thought of 341 is she's going to raise us a great herd bull.
Yeah.
Because she
Big
was
and
so
stout.
big and so stout. But her calves,
There's
the birth weight was too.
Now
She never did make a bull, I don't think, did she?
Maybe one. And we ended up
She
butchering.
grandmothered a bull.
Yeah.
A great
Great,
bull.
yeah. No, she
But it had
That's
to breed
right.
some of that out of her to
We
get
had
to
It
to-
took
that
you 2
point.
generations. Yeah.
early on, when we're trying to breed, just shoot for those maximums, we had a lot of fallout because we had to castrate all those bulls. The heifers were big birth weights and all that kind of stuff. And like, this is not going to work. So, one, we got big birth weights, big birth weight EPDs. I'm not going to be able to sell these bulls anyhow. This cow's not usable. So I'm going to have to focus on mating this cow. I love this cow, and I want to. There's some use in this cow, and I want to keep her in the herd. One, sentimental. Two, she's cool to look at. She catches everybody's eye. But how am I going to be able to make her usable? And so by doing that, we started looking at moderate frame bulls that had low birth weights and stuff like that. And because she was on the extreme side, I almost had to look on the extreme low end side to find something where we could try to hit the middle. And so we would use lower birth weight bulls, moderate frame bulls. And when we started doing that, we were just keeping female after female after female. And they have been wonderful staying in the herd, being good productive cows and stuff like that. So we took that cow that was the extreme and we mated her to bulls to really tone her down and dial her back. And then we hit right down the middle. And those cows have worked exceptionally well. So she is a good example of that. But in the particular mating that we were talking about with Big Mamu, 341 was getting old. And I said, well, I could probably use another breeding piece. You know, sometimes that's probably the key that you could use on some of these extremes is find those pieces that you like and use them as breeding pieces and as part of the plan where maybe this generation is not, this first generation is not going to be where I even need to be, but the following generation and looking down the road several generations. But this particular mating, 341 was getting old. And I knew she didn't have much left in her. And I said, I want to kind of concentrate her genetics and see what we can do. So we have 160, who's an up-and-coming sire, and he's breeding true. He's consistent, but he's also got a lot of the characteristics of that cow.
Because it's her grandson.
That's right.
Right? Yeah.
But that cow has bred true 2
Mhm.
generations down to get to him in terms of breed character, head shape, hump size, bone, body, and all that kind of stuff in a more usable package of 160. So I was like, okay, we followed the path of the traits that we wanted. Now I can go back with that cow getting old, and I want to concentrate her genetics. So I flushed that grandson back to her, resulting in 4 pregnancies, 4 calves that were born. One we had to pull out of the cow, and it died.
Are these the ones that I said I think we've gone too far?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so we had one that we had to pull out of the cow and just had a terrible time. We might have lost the recep and the calf. We had a 110-pound bull calf and then a 105 or 100 and something pound bull calf that had just massive bone, massive humps, massive heads, all kind of, like, they were freaking stout. But you can't use them in the real world. So we end up castrating those. And then we ended up
15 years ago, you would have sent him to the show barn.
That's right. Well, we'd have sent him in the
That's
show
true.
barn in effort to trying to win Houston,
Mhm.
you know. But reality, thinking where these cattle need to work, they're throwaways. So, and then we had Big Mamu, which was a 93-pound heifer. So she was the only one even usable, and even for a heifer, that's freaking massive, you know. So now, even when we were mating that cow, we're still thinking about the same things. But I got the traits that I wanted.
Mhm.
While extreme, I can use them as a breeding piece. But I'll guarantee you, over time, I've learned not to breed power to power.
Yeah. The taste of humility, too, I guess, if we'd been able to admit opportunity missed. Could you imagine if what we know now, 5-7 years ago, and what you would have bred 341 to? We could have really, I mean, like the Pardon Sweetie experiment. I mean, if you could have done things similar to that with 341, she may be up there towards the top end of the donor cow list.
I do want to move on, but if you had to say who are the outliers in our program, who would they be?
Sweetie.
Outlier for frame size.
Yep.
242.
Big Mamu.
Maybe outlier for bone.
Bone.
And
stoutness. We try to avoid it as 285 heifer of Annie's is an outlier.
And then
that's probably outlier on the traits of growth, bone, performance, and all that kind of stuff. But we even have outliers on the other side of things that are super, super, super productive, and
you could be a good outlier
and have all, but well, not necessarily that, but super, super productive and all that. But they can't raise a good one to save their life. And when I say good one, phenotype that can go win a show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so they're always producing cattle that just need more muscle. They need more of this, and they need more punch and power.
Would you call like Boombox an outlier for size?
Oh, he's huge. Yeah.
I mean, would you call Noble an outlier for size?
Absolutely.
160 is an outlier
for muscle.
I mean,
muscle and bone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but like Noble, he's an outlier in the breed in terms of bone size. At one time, he was the heaviest had the highest weaning weight EPD in the breed. He was number 1 weaning weight, number 1 yearling weight bull. But at the same time, he pushed the envelope so far there. He also had a lot of weaknesses. Birth weight was a weakness. To, maybe his daughters weren't the most maternal because he was heavily focused. But you can use that bull on those cows that are just talking about that were at the other end of the spectrum, that are super maternal, that are super productive, and they can raise good fat calves. They might just not be the calves you want. And so you could hit those, you could put those two together and hit the middle, So
who's our optimums? I mean, obviously Margaret
250.
Yeah, 250.
259. Bull.
259.
Yeah, I mean, even like
230.
Yeah, I think 230.
Yeah, I would say so.
An optimum's kind of middle of the road, does everything. I think some of the Pardon Sweetie females have kind of we used literally 2 extremes, met in the middle, and kind of like
Mini
and Smoke Show too. I think are pretty well for unprovens. Pretty well optimum as far as the phenotype, at least that I think they're supposed to look.
And it's in that particular situation where you have to fix an extreme, and sometimes you have to use an extreme to fix it. But to make the most consistent progress on a wider swath of cattle, it's always best to use the cattle that are already optimum and kind of keep you in the middle of the road and keep you out of the ditches.
Yeah, like begets like.
Yeah. And so those are the ones that have fewer fallout in terms of throwaways because they were culls for one way or another. But sometimes you got to use those extremes to help you.
Yeah, and we'll see how it goes when we start getting these cattle in production. But I almost think of them like an F1.
Yeah.
Like there's from two so unrelated animals as far as body type. I mean, they're both Brahmins, but about opposites. And so it'll be how consistent do those cows breed going into the next generation, being almost like an F1.
Because it's the problem, the swing of consistency when you're using those extremes is so much wider. Because you can get some cattle that look more like one extreme and some cattle that look more like the other. But what we're looking for are those cattle that hit the middle.
Yeah, that's kind of why that mating has been a little unique or a little surprising to me, is that you would think there would be less consistency considering how different the bull and the cow are. But that's probably the most consistent mating as far as they all look the same.
Yeah, I would say that particular mating is the exception to the rule.
But I would also go on the record, we are dang excited to breed 242. I mean, from the day she was born and she wasn't winning shows, but because she was so kind of freakish, we've all said we can't wait to breed her.
Yeah, and she's already she'll have embryo calves coming before too long.
That kind of makes the fun of it.
Yeah.
The fun of...
It's the artist part of it.
I also know now how I can fix those issues.
If there's anyone who understands the need for branding, it's a cattle rancher. For 25 years, Ranch House Designs have been crafting custom logos for ranches just like yours around the country. And there's nothing more important than the right logo for building your brand. A logo is the handshake your ranch needs to capture the attention of potential clients and customers. So, turn to Ranch House Designs to make the solid first impression your ranch deserves. Let's get branding your ranch today. Go online to ranchhousedesigns.com.
So I want to sort of segue this into our next topic, which the topic is going back and using old genetics in present day. And I'm going to share like our red Brahmin story. I think this is where it's applicable to us. We had bought some red Brahmins early on, and then someone had given us the advice that we need to go back and use some red Brahmin bulls from like the 70s because they were so good, and how awesome it would be to use these bulls from the 70s on modern day cows. And did we ever, or did we not?
We did.
But I've seen people do
we had
this.
a heavy influx in the beef program during that time too.
That kick-started Brahmin country beef.
Validated red Brahmin beef quality.
I think this is another polarizing topic that people, agree and disagree on a lot of. Is there a time to go back and pull an old bull from the tank? And not. I mean, I'm going to also toss out, since we've been talking a lot about 341, you did this with a 341, direct daughter? 70?
Yep.
No, yeah, 75. So you went back with 341 and you used an old bull to produce 75, who then you have also bred to another half-brother or whatever they are, 160. They're super closely related, but those are like some amazing calves. But I do want to point out that's many generations of interweaving and strategy, and like it's taken a lot to get there. But here, go. That's the topic.
I don't know what podcast is going to air first, this one or Joe Ward's, but we went over the same thing in Joe Ward's deal, and he was talking about going back and using some older bulls,
like the 229 bull,
229, and some other bulls. But the bulls he mentioned were great, proven bulls, and I said, I want to point out that just because they're old don't mean they're good.
Yeah.
And he agreed.
But
exactly.
using the bulls that he was selecting, that he was talking about, those were great bulls. And the longer time has gone by, the more they've proven themselves for the traits that he was looking for.
Measurable, quantifiable performance.
Yes. And so those were bulls that over the last 50 years have proven themselves time and time again to be consistent in certain levels or certain areas of production. And so he said, well, what can I do? Basically, he's saying, I'm relying on 50 years of data. These bulls are punching in what I need. And so you hear a lot of times people saying, oh, I'm going back and use an old bull. But always remember, not all old bulls are good. You know,
even if they were good at their time, perceived to be good, air quotes.
Make sure they were good in the qualities that mattered, in the qualities in an animal that you look for that stand the test of time. So no matter what era you're in, no matter what continent you're on or environmental, there are certain traits that no matter where you are or what your situation are that are always important. Foot quality, fertility, production, longevity, those are timeless. Those are, it doesn't matter where you are or when you are, those are always going to get you through. Now, there's other traits like going through the 80s when you're getting really big, or going through the 40s and the 50s when you're getting really small that don't work. But it's those core traits of fertility and production and structural correctness.
Yeah, breeding to old, there's some people that treat it like collecting antiques a little bit, and I don't see much value in that. Just using an old bull
it's like the Teletubbies. No, not the Teletubbies. What are those? Beanie Babies.
Yes.
You know, where you're like, oh, you can collect these and you're going to be a millionaire one day. No.
No.
You're never going to get the return.
And how much we've reached back, I'm not even calling out bull by name, but I can think of 4 or 5 times where we've used, whether it be a Doc LeBlanc bull or whether it be reaching back and using Suva, stuff like that. And it probably works 15% of the time.
Yeah.
20, maybe 25% of the time.
A lot
and the rest of the time.
Swing and misses, too.
You used a Marceau bull, right? An old
one. Yeah.
But you should also clarify, you were using those for a specific purpose, different specific purposes. The Marceau bull, I think you were using to try to drop birth weight.
Yep.
The Suva bull, what did we use that for? Nostalgia?
We might have been collecting antiques.
Funness? I don't know.
Udder quality, milking quality, cleaning up sheets, that type stuff. But then you run into some other issues like sucked a bone out of one and
tall.
Make them tall and a little bit straight-legged.
So theoretically, this is an over-my-head question, but what would be the oldest genetics we would have access to? Because at what point did freezing semen come on the scene? 60s?
50s, 60s.
50s, 60s?
Like the oldest bull I can think of off the top of my head that I know semen exists on would be like the Loxy Gamel de Manso 55. So what, that would be 60s?
64 reserve national champion.
And that's the oldest I can think of.
That was very impressive that you pulled that out of
You got it, girl.
air.
You got
Suva
it.
would be, the early 80s?
Yeah, because you were a baby when Suva,
yes, that's right. So 80. He would have been showing in 80.
And so, but I think when they come about with AI in the late 40s, mid 50s, something like that, but it probably didn't get even more widely used or probably didn't start picking up steam until the early 70s.
Well, like the 55 bull we talked about, those are still ampules. So you had, they came in glass ampules, and you had the file.
Does somebody know how to, does Transova know how to use that?
Yeah, you could still use it. I've
used ampules before. It is cumbersome.
Because you got to, draw the semen up in the pipette, right?
Yeah, but first you got to, score the glass.
Yeah, you got to file, right?
Yeah, and then you got to pop it open, and then you got to get a syringe to suck it out of there.
Make sure you don't get any glass in there.
Yeah.
Do you cut yourself by accident?
You could if you're not careful.
Imagine, I don't know. But it's not easy.
No.
Yeah. You've been writing a lot of stuff down. You have any stuff to add on this?
Not on this one, I don't think. But, I guess, and we talked about it with Joe Ward, it's more of the purpose. Why did you go back and use the old bull matters more than just the fact that you're using an old bull.
Yeah. So, even back to 341, we talked about basically the extreme mating between her and 160 of power and all that kind of stuff. But another extremely successful mating we had was one of those that really we're trying to dial her back. One, we had to get her a more usable birth weight EPD. 2, we had to moderate frame size and try to increase maternal traits. And so when I was on the search for that, I ran across the JDH Gibson bull. That's a bull that was born in 1985. But the reason what I got pulled to him at that time was probably more on the EPD side of things. What drew my attention, because I was looking for outliers on the birth weight side, on the birth weight as well as frame size and maternal ability for bulls that had a high number of highly maternal daughters. And it narrowed my search down to about 5 bulls. And one of those bulls I happened to be able to find some semen on and use, and that was the Gibson bull.
You should point out the way we had that semen is because he was bred by Ferguson Division.
Yep.
This is fun. This is just fun stories. Bred by Ferguson Division, who my grandma was originally part of before she and Dada started V8 Ranch. But I guess in their division or, separation, she still got access to some of their bulls. And so we just had this semen in the tank from her back in the, mid-'80s. And It had never been used. And you asked Mark, right? We still have this semen.
Absolutely.
We were like, we have this semen. Would it be okay if we used it? Of course, we asked Nana.
Yeah.
She said yes.
We had never used it, but that bull was proven. He's the sire to the JDH Elliott 761 bull that's so popular around the world.
Do you remember, though, when we showed Uncle James those calves? He loved them.
Yes.
Did he actually come out
to the ranch? He came to the ranch.
He came to the ranch when Eileen was just a baby.
Oh, really?
And, looked at them, and it was really a cool moment.
Yeah, I really liked that. And, of course...
And Uncle Richard, too. They both came out.
At the same time.
Yeah, they both came out together.
And they're like, you used that old bull? And I'm like, really?
It worked.
You tell me if it worked. And they're like, yeah, it worked.
Yeah.
But I do remember going through the process of that. Before I found the bull, I had the sire summary. That was back when ABBA had a sire summary that you could print off. And I went through that entire sire summary and marked out what wouldn't work. And just slowly, by process of eliminating on the traits that I was trying to fix, I went down through and just started marking stuff out, process of elimination. And I'd get through the birth weights, then I'd go to scrotal circumference, and then I'd go to this and that, and I came up with a list of about 5 bulls, and then I went and looked at progeny on digital beef and narrowed it down even further. And then after that, I went and started looking at pictures and old videos.
So how much time a day do you say you spend on digital beef? All those times when I'm like, where are you? You're sitting on the computer in front of digital beef.
There's a way
got a handful of jelly beans and he's just clicking away.
There's a way to track that. They got a little deal on who's on it at that time on the left-hand side of the screen.
It's always
you. That's what Milton told me one time. Mr. Milton said, do you just leave digital beef on at all time, like always stay logged in? I said, no, I don't think so.
How much time do you spend on it?
Enough, for sure. A lot of times it's the same. They say, hey, look this bull up.
Yeah,
we'll both be looking at the same bull.
Together. I'm going to share an observation regarding perceptions of old bulls, because recently a picture of an old bull flashed up on my Facebook. And it was not an old bull, but I would say it was a bull that maybe 10 or 15 years ago I loved. And even today when people say that bull's name, I had this image in my head that was really good. But then when the actual picture flashed up on my Facebook, the bull wasn't at all as good as what I had in my head. I had, I guess, nostalgically made myself like this bull so much better because I was picturing it way different than what he actually looked like.
Yeah.
And I even thought to myself, I've personally bred at least 5 to 10 more bulls that I like way better than this bull, my own breeding. But if you had asked me, who's better, this bull or your bulls? I would have obviously said, he's in top 5 greatest bulls of all time. But your head can play tricks on you.
But that's the way it should be too in terms of progression. They should always be getting better and stuff like that. But you do have those memories that are tied to those animals and the feelings that were going on at that time. And nostalgia can amplify
breeding for nostalgia.
Your thoughts of quality.
Can wreck shop on a person. They can ruin
Not
things.
A productive practice.
No matter what, do your homework and make sure the cattle are proven in those areas. That is where older bulls can come into play because they do have that experience.
Yeah.
They have been proven. And so I guess in a way, if you need to know something, it's probably go ask somebody that's got an experience in that certain level.
Go on Digital Beef and look up the progeny.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, I want to move on. Did you have anything else, Keaton?
No, I'm good on that one.
Okay, I want to move on. I've got a couple more, but this topic is called the impact of one breeding decision. And it kind of ties together with, breeding for these extremes, breeding old bulls. And it was a post that I saw on an Angus breeder. Just to summarize, Your Angus cow is pregnant for 283 days. She has less than 90 days to breed back. Then you have 9.5 months until you see the calves, except you really don't. That when they calve, the story has just begun. You take your first observations 6 to 8 months from then at weaning. Once they hit 12 to 14 months, you see more. Their skeleton develops, their hormones kicked in, the muscle is becoming expressive, but even then, there's still a lot you don't know. At 2 years old, their pretty much growth is developed. Then it says another 6 months until you know how those perform as mothers. Another 4 to 5 years until you know if the females have adequate fertility and staying power to be profitable. The bulls don't reach their peak until 5 years old. Blah, blah, blah. In short, one breeding decision has a minimum of a 7-year delayed result. 7 years until you see the full fruits of your labor or the consequences of your decision.
That might be that might be the hardest part of breeding cattle, because that is so true. And I mean, we've used bulls before, and especially in a natural herd, when we turn a bull out. And you use that and you're like, okay, well, you end up keeping a bunch of daughters or this or that. And just like they're talking about, you don't see the full fruits, good or bad, for 7 years. And at the end of 7 years, if it was a bad fruit, where there's none of those females left or none of those genetics left, you screwed up a whole calf crop and several generations of calf crop. And it's disheartening.
We're thinking about that from using our own herd, but it's even worse if you think about it as a seller. And you've sold someone a terrible animal, or even maybe worse, it's not going to be right for them, but you've sold it, and then your customer has 7 years of trouble.
Yeah.
Which is about when we see people exiting the business.
It happens
We can call
all the
it.
time.
You can call it. You can look at the buyers in a certain sale, and you can call it. In X amount of years, they're going to be done. It's proven. It's a proven track record.
Oh yeah, and you think about random things that could happen, but say and they're out there, a side group that all the sons struggle to pass fertility tests. Like that is a huge financial loss. You feed all these bulls, but you don't know it till you fed a measurable amount of them out to 2 years old, and then you find out. And what's Jimmy say? Rip them out by the roots.
Rip them out by the roots. Get them all out.
Yeah.
But teats blow out at age 5, and whatever, that cow's not even profitable
Bad dispositions.
Yet.
That can crop up 3
Yeah.
generations down the line.
The hard thing is, a lot of times by the time a bull is sure enough bulletproof proven, he's been dead for 5 years, and because you've got those daughters in production and who fell out and how many stayed in and all that kind of stuff. And even same way on the cows that you're keeping daughters out of and stuff. Really, in a perfect world, I'd only be keeping daughters out of cows that were productive 10-year-old cows or older, and bulls that I had semen on that had proven themselves 20 years ago,
But if you're working against time,
that's
who has
the problem.
10 to 20 years
It's
to figure all that
Well,
out?
I think it's flawed human mentality too, or at least cattle breeder mentality, because we talked about how easy it is for these guys to say, like, I'm going to go reach back and use a bull 30 years ago. Really, what we should be using are bulls that are about 7 to 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that have worked their way through the system and continue to work, but no, it's not cool to use that bull. It's cool to use the new and exciting, or it's cool to reach back and use a bull from 30 years ago, but it's not cool to those people to have, a 75% of your calf crop is 160/8. Like, that's pretty cool to me, but everybody wants to be different or do
the sire of the
new.
month.
It's one of those. It's almost like one of those 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or something like that. Or it's hard to get far like that.
Yeah.
But I've found out over time in breeding those extremes, you can make the quick changes. Well, but you also have a lot of fallout, and it takes even longer just to try to stabilize things and level things back out. And while shooting down the middle and using just the optimum cattle, while changes may be slower, they're steadier and more consistent over time. And 10 years down the road, you're farther ahead. It's like a big, heavy freight train that you're trying to get started, but once you get rolling, it's harder to slow it down.
Yeah.
And that's where those kind of middle-of-the-road types come in. Whereas the extremes, you can make fast, quick maneuvers, but it's not going to get you as far down the road.
Okay, so I have a question. Maybe Keaton and both of you, but you're a numbers guy. We in our herd, we definitely experiment and we definitely do things. What percent of our entire breeding program? What percent is general, consistent, what constant matings, and what percent are those swing for the fence matings?
I'd say
Because we do both, and both have a place.
if you just took like ET calf,
Or maybe I should ask a two-part question. What are we now, but ideally, where should we be?
well, we're pretty good about making sure that what we, I guess, mitigating risk would be. We try as hard as we can with. So every month where we may have a few of those kind of shoot from the hip matings, we're going to have 12 calves going to be born out of the tried and true, the 160-21s, the Parton Sweeties, the matings that we know work, so that if it does maybe go bad,
like 80-20?
Yeah,
80% reliable,
80-20,
proven,
but
20% experiment.
But only like five of those would be extreme.
I would almost say 90-10. And one, now if it left to my own devices and I did not have to make a profit,
I know
it would be opposite. But when I got the warden at home keeping track on me, I have to play it safe, and I have to. And at the end of the day, I have to make sure we stay in business and be profitable. So the cows that keep us in business, I have to focus on those more and make sure we make good, solid matings. Like you said, mitigate risk, that we have the least amount of throwaway, the highest amount of consistency, and the cattle that, in terms of the highest amount of consistency in cattle that check the most boxes. And then, and I can get away with about 10% of experimentation.
But it's not like we didn't think out the experiment before we went into it. Like, we have a pretty high, or at least in our head, there's a high likelihood that this mating is going to work. That's why we did it. And so, I mean, even then, those matings that are unproven, we've done a lot of the homework to at least eliminate quite a bit of the risk, whether that's studying cows' production records, talking to somebody that's used that bull a bunch and seeing what the problems they maybe had and things to avoid. There's a lot of homework that goes into it.
You had a good
It's not just
observation.
willy-nilly.
You had a good observation the other night. You said you think the more expendable income people have, the more they start playing around with
That's right.
extremes. But when your budget is tight, you go with the things that always work: fertility, structure, balance. But when you do have a little extra playing money is when people may start
That's right.
drifting towards some of these freak show zoo animal type things.
You can even back through history, follow the economy and kind of look and see what's, follow the type of cattle that kind of go with them.
Is he following the economy?
If I got a lot of extra money, I'm going to do a little more experimentation.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But at the same time, you can go through when the economy's bad, when the cow market's bad, or this or that. People play it a little closer to the home. They shoot it a little more down the middle because they know they have to be profitable. But when economies get good, money gets good, you hit the lottery, something like that, it's a swing for the fence every time. We're going to see how far we can take it. But the more you swing for the fence, the more variation in so many things.
Risk, like you said, the more risk you have.
You're like I don't know, always a term that I've emulated or wanted to be recognized as is like a program. When you think of a program, a true breeding program, these people they're not just going haywire and trying all these different matings and using 15 different bulls. Like Gerald Buck, he always talks about, I heard on a podcast, he'd say that if you use more than 4 bulls in a year, you don't have a program, you're just playing around.
Yeah.
Like if you can't use one of these 4 bulls to fix the problem in your cow, then you either got the wrong cow or you don't have a breeding program, I guess.
Yeah, and I'd say we've just started to reach program level in probably the last 3 or 4 years. Because before that, the variation was nuts, off the charts. But we were fortunate that through that variation that we had something for everybody. You could plug them in here and there, but now we're honing it in over the last 3 years. But what we ended up with is cattle that are more consistent, that are higher quality, that check more boxes, but while at the years ago we would have a lot of variation and could plug in something for everyone. Now we're getting more cattle that can plug in more places on a consistent level because they work for everybody.
Yeah.
I have a nice graphic, if it hasn't posted yet, it's coming, that shows our bull battery 10 years ago versus our bull battery now. And it's really interesting because 10 years ago at the time, we were very proud of the bulls we offered. We thought, hey, we're proud to own and breed these bulls. Now I don't know if there's very many I'm discarding the semen on some of them, but, looking at our bulls that we have now, it's better Brahmins, more Brahmins, better Brahmins, expansion of Hereford, Angus, and Red Angus. Yeah. And that kind of lends to your discussion of a program rather than just kind of marketing semen sires here and there.
Yeah, but better cattle that check more boxes on a more consistent level.
It's adapt and change. I'd say that over the past 5 years, there's been probably 6 or 7 bulls that have come through that were, for that particular year or two, they had 30 or 40 calves born on the ranch, and we were talking about riding through cows yesterday. There's a bull in that list that we've used a bunch that we both decided we probably don't need to ever use again. And the only way, we still love it.
But that's good.
Bull, and we really were excited to use him when we got the chance to use him. But now that
that's good because you've gotten better over 5 years.
Exactly.
You've adapted.
And that's exactly right.
But also progress. In that same way, when y'all AI'd all your first calf heifers, you AI'd them all to 259, who is a 15. He's dead, but would he be 15 or 18? 15, I don't even 16, know. But he's one of those that through the last 15 years, he has consistently proven he's still got what it takes to make quality cattle. And so
he's the same kind of bull as we were talking about, like the 229 bull or those old stalwarts that have worked for forever. And he's just kind of that bull where you can count on him to supply the things that he supplies every time.
Mm-hmm. The cool thing is thinking about through those bulls in my head of that type that have proven themselves over time. They're not that
they're
far
all
pretty
apart.
close
it's
in
us
terms
that's
of
moving around.
Yes, that's right. And so it's funny to see, and you look back over those bulls that have proven it time and time again over time, and then you put pictures of them together, you're like, hey, these bulls are very similar in type. And then you start focusing on that type in your herd, and it's off to the races.
That's a program. Yeah.
Yep.
Which leads us to kind of what's on our next podcast. So any final thoughts? I had more, but we can save these for another discussion. We're at an hour. Any final wrap-up thoughts?
Yeah, there was something I wanted to hone in on a little bit more, and I see they're using data versus visual and all this kind of stuff. I think it all works together. And
as you would consider that another polarizing topic.
Yes, because you hear people.
That's right.
You see people all the time.
That Facebook post the other day that went viral about the selection using EPDs versus visual appraisal.
Yeah, and I think both are highly important. But there's so many people that get so polarized to one side or the other that they lose track. They're all tools. Everything's tools, and why wouldn't you use as many tools available as you can in your toolbox? Just back to jumping back to the 341 and Gibson deal, the EPDs and stuff really helped me hone in on where I wanted to find, and then once I got a small list of bulls, I was able to pick the bull that I really liked. So, no matter what, you always got to look for feet and structural correctness and all that kind of stuff, and fertility and performance. But once you got that stuff, why not use every tool available to make the most informed decision?
We should clarify that we use both, but nobody here is going to use a bull that visually sucks.
No, absolutely not.
Visual, we say we breed with data and we breed with visual, but our visual standards are extremely high.
You gotta have it.
I am very precise that we are not going to use a bull that looks bad no matter what his EPDs are.
That's right.
And some people do miss that.
Yes.
I think people who are like, oh, I only breed for data. Well, then you look at a picture of like their bull.
Yeah, we can tell.
I hate to say it, but the bull is terrible.
Yeah, no.
You should not be breeding anything for data with that bull.
You have to start with the foundations of functional cattle, whether it's structural correctness and good feet and good udders and all that kind of stuff that crazily some people call convenience traits. I'm like, that's not it. That's the foundation.
Right. That should be the basics.
So once you check that box, that's the very basic level. Then you can start reaching up and grabbing this tool or that tool, whether it's EPDs or DNA or
he's hand grabbing in the areolas.
Yes, and so you're reaching up off the shelf and grabbing the tools. Why not use everything available to make the most informed decisions?
You look like you're thinking.
No, well, I was just thinking about like selection based on numbers, and I do think that people probably aren't using data appropriately, and so that has a lot to do with it. But like one thing that I saw I thought was really cool, I took a picture of it and then haven't really talked about it at all, but R.A. Brown's, the way that they put their EPDs into like a cell catalog now is if they use a EPD graph and then it has like a green window. So between this number and this number, that's good. Then they have a yellow where we would consider this fair, that falls between this EPD and this EPD. And then they'd have red and it's even wider and it'd say this is unacceptable and it's this window and this window.
And on either side of the extreme.
Yeah, exactly. So it like all those traits, like this is too high, this is too low, they've put in an optimum
green.
window.
I love that when I saw that. I'm glad you brought that up.
I mean, again, if I had to say what percentage of our breeding decisions are data-based versus visual-based, I don't even know because I think it's so ingrained in us second nature. Like, no, when you're about to mate up a cow, you don't pull up Doble's EPDs on Digital Beef and look at what his EPDs are. You don't do that at all, but it's second nature to you. You know what he's going to bring, and you do that visually too, So it's not like we're sitting here mating up stuff on a spreadsheet by any means. It's all in our head and with our eye, but you've studied the data enough that you know what the data means.
Yeah, but I even go back and look from time to time because just like we were talking about earlier, those bulls that's in our mind were great bulls. They're maybe not quite so good anymore. You can do the same thing about performance in a certain area.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, yeah. And it doesn't hurt to go back and look at the hard concrete data.
Yeah, that's true.
Just to remind yourself, because things can get amplified over time in your own head.
And on Facebook.
Like how good looking I am.
Until Molly posts a video of you on Instagram and he's like, I'm mad.
I got fat.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess we are probably right in the middle of breeding with data and breeding visually.
Yeah. Or the way you summed it up is exactly how it goes. Because never once am I like, I don't know, Brandon, that one's a 6'9" on birth. We better think.
Right.
That doesn't ever come out of our mouth. We just, we know how these cattle have performed. But like what Brandon says, it does help to go look back and remind you. And it's not always the most contest.
Well,
like I still think Big Mamu may be the heaviest weaning, or not Big Mamu, Big Dolores may have the highest weaning weight in BRC ranch history, and that was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's not something we're pursuing. That's not the direction we've been. So she was an extreme, but she was an outlier. We avoided it, honestly.
Yeah.
But
as we've matured over time, we've shot more for optimum versus maximum.
And I did write down, you guys don't have to look up data or like study so much data because on our ranch, you're there. Yeah. So you are the one calving out the calves. So hey, if I've had a whole calf crop of 160s and they've all been bigger, you know that. You don't have to look it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's life. It's your life. And we all are there when you're weaning and you know what bulls you have to cut and you see it in the ear, what steer calves you cut and put into the bull program and you see it on the ear tag. You are using that data in all of your decisions, but it's not like you're sitting there with a spreadsheet at your iPad at the breeding shoot. You just know it.
You always remember the really good and the really bad. And so you're like the really, really good, you're like, oh, that's the greatest heifer we ever had. And you might forget the fact that all of her brothers and sisters was the worst you ever had, or the cows you had to help pull calves on, the cows you had to help nurse, the cows you had to, the ones that cause you a lot of problems, you always remember them. And you start to see patterns, and you're like, okay, I'm never going back and using this or that mating again, or this bull or that cow again. And you start thinking about that. And then on the other side, the cows that always do really good, you think about those. But the ones everybody always forgets are those cows that just kind of fly under the radar. But they're there forever. They're always doing their job and things like that. I think we ought to be paying attention sometimes a little under the radar.
I think that's like me and studying my toxic family narcissistic stuff, I think that's a human phenomenon too. Like in families, the kids that cause the least trouble and are always like the most dependable are the ones that like don't get the most attention. And, like the kid that's always crying and throwing a fit and whatever, he gets the most attention. But the kids that are like solid, quiet, dependable, that can fend for themselves, they don't get attention, in toxic families.
It's the same way.
It's the same in cattle, I
exactly.
think.
And so over time, we've learned to pay attention to those cows. Mm-hmm. And like, hey, this cow's been here forever. She's weaned a calf every single year, although it might be a calf that's just average in terms of average quality, average weaning weights, average this or that. So they don't really reach out and grab your attention, but she's been here forever doing the same thing. While she might have only had a $5,000 bull calf every single year, she outproduced the cow that had a $10,000 one this year and then didn't calve for a year and had 5 steer calves, Yeah.
No news is good news.
Yes.
And so over like I said, over time we've just started to learn to pay attention to those cows and turn our focus more on those cows.
Well, all right. Well, this has been great, y'all. I think it's a great podcast. So we're going to probably sign off and see y'all again next time on Over the Hump.
You've been listening to the Over the Hump podcast. Our passion is Brahman cattle, and it runs deep. And this show is about its rich history, industry trends, and stories that define the American Brahman. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at BR Contraire. See you next time on the Over the Hump podcast.